Good morning, Saba. Good morning, Saba. How are you? Today, inshallah, we'll start with Unit 6, What a Character, okay? Page 57. Before we start, what a character? From our title, as you know, that the characters are one of the elements of a story. So here in Unit 6, we have a story, right? So let's start from reading, okay? Stories are usually written in past tense. All of you know that the story should be written in the past tense يعني بالزمن الماضي تمام. Now number 2, a descriptive story uses carefully chosen words to create an impression of the characters. A descriptive story يعني القصة الوصفية تمام، انه لازم نستخدم carefully words الكلمات بحذر to create an impression انطباع of the characters عن الشخصيات تمام. هلا authors have several ways of presenting a character here to are two. في عنده طريقتين لتقديم الشخصيات how the person looks كيف يبدو and how the person behaves وكيف يتصرف. So these two ways it's so important when the authors write the story, okay? So how the person looks and how the person behaves, okay? Yeah, let's start with unit 6, page 58, okay? Yeah. So Mr. Duffy's workshop. Before we start, look at the pictures. What is the type of the text? What do you think? So here we have a story, right? We have a story. All of you know that a story, it means قصة تمام. Yeah, let's start with Mr. Duffy's workshop, okay? Before we start, let's start reading the paragraph. Grandfather wanted George to go to Mr. Duffy's house to collect a present. The present was for George's little sonny, Sally. Mr. Duffy phoned this morning. Grandfather told George, he's finished. Would you mind going now? George didn't mind going at all. He loved to go to Mr. Duffy's house at any time. He loved talking to Mr. Duffy about his work. Most of all, he was fascinated by Mr. Duffy's tools. A few minutes' walk brought George to a tall house. He knocked on the old wooden door. After a few moments, Mrs. Duffy opened it. Come along in, George, she said. Mr. Duffy is in the workshop. She walked ahead of George along a short passageway and stopped at the open kitchen door. George caught a glimpse of pools of plums and peaches on the kitchen table. Delicious smell of simmering fruit wafted past his nose. Mrs. Duffy pointed to an open doorway where bright sunlight fell across the single step. Okay, let's start. Grandfather wanted George to go to Mr. Duffy's house, so to collect a present. So we have a question here. Why did grandfather want George to go to Mr. Duffy's house to collect a present? Present here, it means gift, يعني هدية. Collect يحضر, يجلب, to bring. The present was for George's little cousin, عفوا. So whose gift is it? It's for George's little cousin. Okay, Sally. Her name, Sally. Mr. Duffy phoned this morning. Grandfather told George he is finished. Okay, so who called this morning? Mr. Duffy. Mr. Duffy. He is finished. Here we have the pronoun he, underline it. It refers to Mr. Duffy. Okay? Would you mind going now? George didn't mind going at all. So he loved to go to Mr. Duffy's house at any time. He loved talking to Mr. Duffy about his work. Most of all, he was fascinated by Mr. Duffy's tools. So why didn't he mind going? Because he loved to go to Mr. Duffy's house at any time. Because he loved talking to Mr. Duffy about his work. This is the first reason. The second reason, most of all, he was fascinated يعني مسحور. Okay, by Mr. Duffy's tools. Tools يعني أدوات. Okay, yeah, let's continue. A few minutes walk brought George to a tall house. Okay, he knocked on the old wooden door. After a few moments, Mrs. Duffy opened it. So who opened the door? Who opened the door? Mrs. Duffy, السيدة Duffy. Okay. Opened it refers to the door or the wooden door. Okay. It refers to the wooden door. He, her, he knocked. It's refers to George. Okay. Yeah, let's continue. Mrs. Duffy opened it. Come along in. يعني ادخل George. She said. Also she, it refers to Mrs. Duffy. Come along in. So who said these sentences? Mrs. Duffy. Okay, come along in. Who said these sentences? Mrs. Duffy. Mr. Duffy is in the workshop. Okay. She walked ahead of George along a short passageway and stopped at the open kitchen door. Often. So, where is Mr. Duffy? He is in the workshop. يعني بمعمله. She walked ahead of George along a short passageway and stopped at open kitchen door. So, where did she stop? She stopped at the open kitchen door. وقفت على باب عتبة الباب المطبخ. George caught a glimpse of pools. Glimpse هم لمحة of pools من الأواني. Plums, خوخ and peaches دراغ on the kitchen table. So what did he notice at the table? What do you think? What did he notice at the table? He noticed pools of plums and peaches. Okay. Delicious smell of simmering. Simmering هون تتطبخ. Okay. Fruit wafted past his nose. Wafted past his nose يعني دخلت إلى مناخيره. So where did the smells go? It goes to his nose. Okay. Mrs. Duffy pointed to an open doorway. Pointed يعني أشارت. Open doorway where bright sunlight fell across the single step. So where did Mrs. Duffy pointed? She pointed to an open doorway where bright هون لمعان الشمس أو ضوء الشمس الساطع ساقط across the single step على أول درجة اللي بتفوتك على workshop. تمام؟ So this is the first paragraph for our lovely story, Mr. Duffy's workshop. Okay? Inshallah, we will continue next class. Thank you.